Thanks for stopping by.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, yeah, I really kind of was a jerk last time, and, well, I think we should talk.
It's about time we finally talk this out.
You know what? Talking's too hard. I'm just gonna end this right now. What the... What? How? You've had superpowers this entire time, and you just never use them?
I told you I had the power to destroy you, but talking it out is easier.
You know what? Fine. I'm ending this.
Alright, I suppose it's time.
It's time for you and I to become one. Alright then. Let's do it. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Whew. I feel whole again. Weird. Alright. Now that's finally out of the way. Let's focus on the review. Before watching this movie again, I could really only remember the main beats of the story. I didn't really remember any of the in-depth details, but the things I could remember was that the acting was pretty good. I also remembered that the practical effects, or the CGI effects really, those were all pretty well done. Like, it was believable for the time, and watching the movie again, the effects still hold up, and, it still looks like a pretty good movie. The actors are still really well done, and I really enjoyed it again. One thing I will say right off the bat, as I was just talking about how the things I could remember about this movie, is that I remembered the main story beats, and I remembered that overall it was a fairly good movie. Like, it was good acting, good effects, good stuff like that. The one thing I will say that really kind of struck me as a little slow in this movie was like the middle section. So like the opening is pretty good, where like Superman comes back to Earth and he goes back and starts working at the Daily Planet and stuff, and the ending is like really good. It was just like the kind of like the middle part. It just kind of felt like at times I felt like a little like, oh, how much more of the movie do I have left? Checking the time, looking at like my phone, just kind of like the middle kind of dragged a bit, and I feel like that's where kind of got bogged down. And I feel like that's because a lot of the middle part of the movie was Superman just kind of moping around like, oh, Lois has moved on, and oh, coming back and trying is just hard. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, we all know it's hard, but we don't want to see that. We want to see Superman doing Superman things. And to the movie's credit, there is a lot of that in this movie. There is a lot of Superman doing Superman things, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. But I just wanted to address that like, while I thoroughly enjoyed watching this movie again, there was that part in the middle that did feel like it was dragging, and it did feel like it was going on for a little too long. And maybe if this wasn't a 2.5 hour movie, and maybe if it like trimmed down the middle section and like just focused on the good parts, and maybe it was only like a 2-hour movie or an hour and a half or something, I feel like this would have been a much more solid film and a much better received film. And I think that when people say they don't like this film, they're remembering the part in the middle where nothing's really happening and Superman's just kind of moping around. But we'll get into that. So, we're going to talk about the characters a little bit, because I thoroughly enjoyed the way they wrote Superman and Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor, from the first moment you see him, is stealing a dying old lady's fortune. and completely, like, basically, like, taking everything away from her actual next of kin, like, her, like, children, her grandchildren, everything like that. He just kind of swoops in and just steals all of their money and proceeds with his evil plan. And it's like, right off the bat, that is a perfect way to establish your villain. He is charismatic, he is evil, selfish, intelligent. The other thing I really enjoyed about Lex Luthor is just his interactions with his other gang members. Like, so he has these, like, 3 or 4 henchmen that he met in prison, and, like, it's very funny because they, like, you can see that he's just clearly using them because he needs, like, people to do his dirty work, and they're using him because they're like, this guy's got all the money, let's just stick with him. And it's so funny. But it's like their interactions is just so, like, it's like hysterical. It's like one scene, like, he's, you know, just calmly stepping outside with the paper or whatever, sees their van, because they had been stealing something, their van is just riddled with bullets, and, like, he just, like, run into trouble, and the main bad guys, like, the goons, is just like, no, not really. And there's a whole bunch of little scenes like that throughout the movie of just Lex interacting with these people that he clearly thinks are below him, and these guys are just like, you know what, whatever, he's paying us. It's so funny. So in addition to Lex's character being really well written and I enjoyed thoroughly, the other character I really enjoyed was Superman. And, you know, it kind of makes sense that you'd have a really well-written Superman character for your Superman movie, but Man of Steel seemed to miss that memo. I won't harp on Man of Steel too much. But I really enjoyed the character of Superman in this movie. Besides the moments where he was moping and kind of just being like, oh, life is hard again. It's like, when he was actually being Superman, the movie was great. Like, there was a little montage in one of the scenes where Clark walks into the Daily Planet. You know, he'd been back for a couple of weeks or whatever. And you just see, like, on the TV, it was like every station, like every news station just had all these montages of just him flying around and saving people and actually, like, you know, being Superman. That little moment, it was like maybe 2 minutes, not even, of just the scenes of Superman, like, saving people. And it's like, that right there, like, captures more of what Superman is about than all of Man of Steel. Allowing me to explain a little bit more of what I mean by that. In Man of Steel, they were so focused about writing what Superman should be and what he should stand for, rather, like, he was supposed to be this idea, and that's what he became. It wasn't that, like, the character of Superman in Man of Steel was very interesting. It was that he stood for this idea of justice and saving people, but they only talked about it. They tried to fix that a little bit in Batman v Superman, where they had the same kind of little montage of him saving people, but it didn't feel like the same as this montage. He never really looked like he was happy to save people. He was, like, always the same, like, angsty scowl, just always like, I'm doing this because that's what I'm supposed to do. And it's like, he never looked like that's what he wanted to do. And we never, like, were introduced to his character in either Man of Steel or Batman v Superman. His character was never defined, so we never knew that, yes, it's a heavy burden, but this is what he loves to do. It was never clear to us. And it's like, that didn't really feel like Superman. Whereas in this, every single time Clark becomes Superman and is saving people, even in those little montages, you can see he genuinely is happy to help. He's here because he wants to. And we know, like, we are introduced to his character and we can know who he is and why he wants to do this. So another, like, again, there are so many scenes in this movie where Superman just feels like Superman. And, like, the first time that Superman officially makes his return to the public eye is in the airplane scene, where the airplane has the space shuttle on top and is going to launch off into space. It's like, you know, they talk up a little bit about it. But at the same time, Lex Luthor is doing his evil plan that marginally is kind of underwhelming. Basically, his plan causes a blackout that affects everything. Not just things that are, like, plugged into the power grid, but anything that uses electricity completely goes dark for a few seconds. And that messes up their equipment. Rocket ship doesn't detach from the plane, starts messing everything up, and Superman flies in and saves the day. It's a great scene because it shows what Superman can do. It shows what, like, you know, it shows off his powers and shows off his heroic spirit. But it just shows, like, after he saves the day, he catches the plane, he makes sure people are okay. In all of Man of Steel, the only person that that Superman ever checked on was Lois Lane. And in this movie, we have a great, like, number of scenes where Superman is just checking on everyone. Yes, a lot of them have Lois Lane in it because, you know, she's still his, like, romantic interest. But it's like, there are still scenes where he does help other people and genuinely check to make sure they're okay. It doesn't seem like that should be a big, like, deal, like, oh my god, Superman cares, but compared to the movies that we had gotten in recent years, it kind of seems, important to reinforce. Superman does care about everyone he saves. So back to Lex's evil plan. It's about real estate. I mean, it's okay. It's an okay plan. How he goes about it, though, is kind of really strange. Like, so his plan begins with him, again, stealing the money from the old lady, and you're like, okay, here we go. He's back in business. And then he immediately takes her yacht and goes up to the Arctic and just waltzes into the Fortress of Solitude. And it's like, okay, he knows where it is, one, and he could just walk right in. Isn't there, like, a front door that's locked or, like, a security system or anything? And then not only does he just walk right in, but then the computer just turns right on and just starts telling him everything he wants to know. And it's like, this is advanced Kryptonian technology. Doesn't it have some kind of security protocol that you have to, like, prove you're a Kryptonian before it just starts telling you all this or something? And it's like, Lex, you want to use this supposedly advanced technology to build your new empire that will make you undefeatable, and you defeated it without even trying? Okay. I don't know. That part was the part that really got me. It was like, is this really the best technology Krypton had to offer? It just doesn't seem very secure or smart. But yeah, so Lex gets his, evil plan in motion, and he, eventually he crosses paths with Lois Lane and Lois's young son, Jason. And from the moment you meet Jason, this little kid, you're just like, oh, he's Superman's son. And they're, like, trying to play it up like, oh, he's really fragile, oh, he has asthma, he's got all his medicines, and you're like, okay. I'm not buying it, but okay. And then, Lex Luthor, like, they're on the boat, and they're talking about his evil plan. He has, like, a huge cylinder of kryptonite, and he pulls it out of the box, and immediately Jason, like, kind of goes pale, and Lex is just like, yeah, that's Superman's son, isn't it? And everyone is like, that's definitely Superman's son, and Lois is like, no, his father's Richard, no. It's like, we all know. And then, of course, it's revealed that he is Superman's son and has, like, powers, and it's like, you didn't shock any of us. We all knew. It would have been better and more of a shock if he didn't have superpowers. I feel like it would have been a bigger shock and a better twist if instead of playing it up a whole movie like he's definitely not Superman's son, and then like, I think it would have been better to do that, make people in the audience think that he might be Superman's son, and be like, oh, that's definitely Superman's son. And then at the last minute, reveal that, no, he is not Superman's son, he's just a kid. That would have been a better twist. That would have been a more clever writing trick. The kind of that self-awareness of, we introduce this kid, We make him immediately kind of connect with Clark in a way that, like, makes you think that maybe there's something, like, going on here. That, like, this kid is Superman's son, and he didn't know about it. And then you find out at the end that no, it's not Superman's son. That would have been a better twist. Speaking of being on the boat, basically, as Lex's evil plan is coming to fruition, and he's building his island or whatever, basically, Lois, Jason, and Jason's father, quotation marks around that, Richard, gets stuck in a half of the boat that is now sinking into the water, and it is downright terrifying. Like, there's this scene where they're almost climbing out, and then the water hits the door, making it close and lock again, and, like, you know, they just are now sinking into the depths, and it is dark, and it is, like, they just have this little pocket of air that they're, like, looking out through the window at, and they're just helplessly watching as they're just sinking into the ocean. It is terrifying. And then suddenly you hear, like, something land on the on the surface of the boat, and that triumphant music starts playing, and you're just like it's just so triumphant. Like, you just immediately, like, everything's great. Superman's here. Like, you don't even see, like, an actor playing Superman. It's like, in that moment, it was just like, Superman's here. One character that I didn't particularly find terribly interesting was Lois Lane. The actress playing Lois was, you know, a good actress. She did her part well. It was just, I felt like her character wasn't written to be very interesting. She should, like, I don't know, she could have been more interesting and had a bigger role. But for what we got, it was okay. And I did like the scene where Superman has been stabbed with the kryptonite and is, like, drowning, and Lois actually jumps in and saves him. And I was like, that's a nice change of pace. You don't often see Lois Lane saving Superman. And then Superman proceeds to, you know, fly up, get a little bit of extra sunlight, and then lift an entire island made of kryptonite. And it's like, wait a second. That doesn't make any sense. So it's like, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like they wrote themselves into a corner of, like, okay, Lex Luthor's evil plan is to take this crystal that will grow into an island, infuse it with kryptonite, and then he's going to have his Kryptonite Island. And then it's like, well, they wrote themselves into a corner, because how is Superman going to stop him if the entire island is his one weakness? I know, someone said in the writer's room. He'll just get a little more sunlight, and then he'll just lift the whole island before it hurts him. And it's like, that's just crazy enough to work. Except it really doesn't make any sense. But don't think about that part. I don't care how strong you are, or how much extra sunlight you've absorbed that day. If something takes away your powers immediately upon being near it, you're going to be, like, it's radiation poisoning. You can't just power your way through radiation poisoning. But anyway, Superman throws the island out into space, he falls, and it's like, everyone's like, oh no, he's dead. And it's like, no, he's not. One thing I'd like to think before we close the closing thoughts is that, like, because there's a scene after, like, right before Superman, like, wakes up and goes on to be Superman again, is Lex Luthor being stuck on a deserted island with, like, because their helicopter ran out of fuel. I really like to think that Superman knows exactly where Lex Luthor is and that he could throw him in jail, but he just chooses not to. He's like, no. Lex is gonna suffer way more on that island than he ever would in prison, so... And he's way less of a threat out there, so we're just gonna leave him. My closing thoughts on this is that while I don't think that this is by any means a perfect movie, I do think that it is probably the best Superman movie we've gotten in recent years. I have not seen the Christopher Reeve Superman very often. I think I've only seen it once, and it was a very long time ago, so I can't really compare it to this movie. However, I can compare this movie to, again, Man of Steel. This movie, in my opinion, is much better than Man of Steel. solely because they captured the spirit of Superman. This movie, again, in no means is perfect, and it has its faults, but when Superman saves people in this movie and that triumphant music swells, I just can't help but grin ear to ear. Oh, I see this movie and I think that's Superman. And speaking of smiling ear to ear, Superman smiles in this movie. Yes, there are moments where he's a little depressed and just kind of like a moping, but he's never angsty about it. He's never edgy. He's just kind of sad. But it's like he still smiles. He still is Superman. Yes, he's going through this, but he doesn't let that affect the people he's saving. And I really like that about this movie. If you haven't seen this movie, you should definitely go check it out. It's well worth the watch. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. This will be the last review of the year, obviously. I've been doing these once a month. And this whole year I was able to get a review out every month. I hope you enjoyed this year of review, and I hope you stay tuned for next year. Now we're going to look at a film that I remember being terrible, and we'll see if it actually is terrible, or if it turns out to be okay. I'm referring to the movie Aragon, based on the book, loosely, and, well, we'll see if it's as bad as I remember. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you then. Take care.